Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to English 454. This is lecture number 19. Previously, we have been discussing Wordsworth and his preface to the Lyrical Ballad. Wordsworth wrote the preface to the Lyrical Ballad in an attempt to explain to the people of England and to the people of the world, for that matter, why he has chosen this different genre of poetry. Why has he deviated from the a course of the Augustan poets or the new classicist poets? So he has written this preface in order to explain what, according to him, was the definition of poetry, what is the nature of the poetry, what, according to him, was the function of poetry, what is the end of the poetry, for what end poetry is written. And he also wrote to explain the characteristics of a poet and the role a poet is supposed to play in the society, and what is the place of a poetry in a society. So he answered all these questions. He wanted to prepare the minds of people to make them understand why he has chosen this different way of writing poetry. He deviated from the path of the classicals in this way, that he believed that poetry has to be something that is understood by common people. It has to be something written by a man addressing other men. So the language of the poetry and the subject matter of the poetry has to be something that is that is something so near to their hearts. For Wordsworth, everything in poetry depends upon emotions and feelings. For him, imagination and feelings and emotions, they were the essence of poetry. The classists, they believed that there is no place for imagination and there is no place for feelings in poetry. Wordsworth apparently believed differently. He also believed that there is an entire process involved in the creation of poetry. For him, the process of poetry, the poetic composition, a poetic creation, was there. First, there is a notable experience. When you go through that notable experience, you then collect, then there is an image formed in your mind. You collect some images. The collection of images is then contemplated by the mind. Then comes there a state of tranquility. After the state of tranquility, when you recollect the images, recollect the notable experience, there comes an overflow of emotions, the powerful emotions. And this recollection then moves on into the process of poetical composition. It's a simple process nahi hai poetical composition ka, it's quite complicated, and Wordsworth say that there are three elements that are involved in this composition. The first element is that of the senses, which he calls the organic sensibilities. The organic sensibility is something that we all of us have, but according to Wordsworth, a poet has more than usual organic sensibility. It would be rather sharper than a common man. When he would look at a rainbow, his heart would leap out. He would be more impressed by it. His senses would be a little more vivid than the senses of a common man. He would then collect the image. Uski sensibilities zyada sharp isliye hongi because he needs to collect the image. When he wants to recollect it, it comes to him sharper than ever. हमें भी वो image वापस आएगा, लेकिन उसके लिए वो image बहुत ज़्यादा sharp आएगा. अच्छा, फिर उसके बाद he believes the second important thing is that of emotions. Emotions important हैं, लेकिन सबसे ज़्यादा important चीज़ आपकी senses हैं. आपकी senses basically वो image create करती हैं. The second important thing is that of emotions or feelings which are produced in the core of the heart. According to Wordsworth, poetry flows freely from the core of the heart. It's a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, which is then recollected in tranquility. The state of tranquility depends upon the mind. This is the third important step, that your mind has to work in some way. पहले तो वो कहता है कि heart is the most important thing because emotions they are arisen in the heart. जब तक heart है और heart की जो core है वहाँ से आपकी feelings नहीं निकलेंगे तब तक poetry create नहीं हो सकती. लेकिन तीसरी important चीज़ जो वो बाद में add करता है वो ये है कि the emotions and the images created by your organic sensibility, they have to be controlled by something, and that something would be your mind. Your mind is going to play the part of the calming agent. It's going to calm down your excitement. It's going to calm down your charged up emotions. और आप उस state में लेके आएगा कि जब आप अपने notable experience को detach होके observe कर सकेंगे. And in that state, only the feelings which are the purest of the pure, they're going to remain there. और वो जो purest of pure feelings हैं, वो फिर जो हैं further पोइट्री के अंदर कन्वर्ट होंगी। अब इसमें उसका पॉइंट एक ये भी था कि जो लैंग्वेज होगी पोइट्री की, इट्स गोइंग टू बी सो द इमोशंस कॉजिंग पोइट्री दे वुड बी सो पावरफुल दैट दे आर गोइंग टू डिक्टेट द लैंग्वेज एज वेल। He believes that language of poetry and language of prose are not different. He believes that the subject matter of poetry and prose are not different. He says the words that can be used in prose can also be used in poetry. They are essentially the same thing. We use poetry only for the sake of charm. He says that I want to write about nature, but I write in the form of poetry. Why? Because I find it more charming. I find it more presentable. I'm a little more attracted to it. Human beings generally are more attracted towards poetry. He believes that poetry is something that can flow, that has to flow freely, that would flow freely, that would take its course itself naturally. It cannot flow through artificially laid pipes. It means कि आप उसको restrict नहीं कर सकते. He did not believe in poetic diction. He believed in meter, but he did not believe in poetic diction. He didn't say that you need these high-sounding words, these artificial words, these ostentatious vocabulary enriched with your scholarly ideas to prove that you are a good poet. He says कि जब वो poetry आपके heart से निकलेगी, if it's from the core of your heart, then it's going to find its own way, and it's going to decide the language it's going to use. You don't have to do anything. So he says, I'm going to use meter because meter is important, whereas poetic diction for him was not important. Meter is important. Why? Because meter is going to contain the excitement that you have. When you have this notable experience, there's this race between your excitement, your emotions, and the ideas. The ideas and emotions, they race each other in the state of excitement. They follow each other. There's a haphazardness everywhere. So जो meter है ये उसको contain करता है, उसको form में लेके आता है, उसको shape देता है. That is why meter is important. ठीक है? So far जो हमने ascertain किया है preface to the lyrical ballad से, वो ये है कि उसने definition आपको poetry की दी, उसने आपको function बताया poetry का, उसने ये कहा कि poetry is not something that, and a function of a poet is not that of an entertainer only. He believes that the end of poetry is essentially to provide pleasure, but he also says that he believes poetry to be the highest art form. He believes that poetry, philosophy or history or sciences in सबसे superior है poetic art जो है. Why? Because he believes that the history talks of the particular, whereas the philosophy talks of the universal. Poetry, particular, universal, दोनों का amalgam है, दोनों का combination है. In poetry, we teach universal truths with the help of particular examples. So, of course, it's higher than it's higher than history and philosophy. And he believes that it's higher than science as well. Why? Because he says science is something good. When you talk of science, science entertains you. It tells you how to contemplate God, explains all these secrets of the universe to you. But sometimes it so happens that science just becomes a collection of facts. When the science becomes a collection of facts, then it becomes, boring, it becomes selfish, it becomes intellectual only. So he believes that poetry has something to do with emotions as well as intellect. Something that is primarily intellectual cannot be considered or cannot be superior than poetry. So he says कि जो scientist होता है उसकी भी, he is also searching for truth, and the poet is also searching for the truth. अब जो poetic truth है ना, that is to be enjoyed by all. When the poet, he finds out the poetic truth, he sings out, and it's enjoyed by everyone. It's for every nationality, it's for every creed, every race, every ethnicity. लेकिन जो scientific knowledge है, जो scientific process के अंदर जो pleasure उसको मिल रहा है scientist को, it's for him and him alone. He only can enjoy whatever kind of pleasure he's driving out of this scientific research, और जो उस truth की तलाश में जो उसको मजा आ रहा है वो सिर्फ उसी का हिस्सा रहता है. वो इस मजे को शेयर नहीं कर सकता. जबकि पोएट जो है वो उस जो प्लेजर वो खुद हासिल कर रहा है उस ऑब्जर्वेशन से, जो ट्रूथ उसको मिला है, वो प्लेजर वो बाकी लोगों के साथ भी शेयर कर सकता है. साइंटिस्ट अपनी जो उस डिस्कवरी है या इन्वेंशन है उसका बेनिफिट जरूर शेयर कर सकता है, लेकिन वो जो प्लेजर ही derives from discovering that something or inventing that something, he cannot share that pleasure with someone else. So on the whole, Wordsworth gave you a very different idea about what he thought poetry was, what according to him was the function of poetry, what according to him was the nature of the poetry, and what he thought was the poetic process. How does poetry come into being? What are the different things, different elements of human beings that are involved in it. He also talked about the poets, what he thought was essentially the characteristics of poet. He thought that a person who thinks long and deep and who has more than usual share of organic sensibility could be a good poet. But he did not stop at poet. He also decided to talk about the critics as well. Why? Because preface जो था lyrical ballads का, it was all about criticism, ना कि कैसे criticism होना चाहिए, because he was critical of what has been done before him. So he also set a standard sort of. उसने एक criteria आपको दिया है कि these kind of people they cannot be good critics and this kind of people they can be good critics. तो उसके ख्याल में critical appreciation के लिए people who are very young, they are not they're not good enough critics, they're not mature enough to criticize, because उनकी जो passions होती हैं they rule their head. So when the passions rule their head, they judge things in a state of excitement. So in order to be a good critic, you have to detach yourself from your emotions. You have to look at things objectively and not subjectively. You should not let your passions, your prejudices and your biases rule your judgment. Okay? So he also says that sometimes these young people who can claim to be critics, these people they do not believe in the good and they do not believe in the bad the way we people believe, because for them pleasure is a little more important. So for him, younger people are not suitable to be mature or competent critics. But he does not say at the same time that older people or people with age, they are better critics. Why? Because he says that sometimes so happens that poetry might be an escape for these people. They have passed through so much of life, they have suffered so much probably, or they are sick and tired of the humdrum of life, so they decided that they don't want to, when they read this collection of poetry, they find it an escape, and that is why they give it good judgment. या फिर ऐसे भी हो सकता है कि it reminds them of their youth, the collection of poetry, it reminds them of their youth, and when it reminds them of their youth, they give it a good judgment. So for a mature critic, Wordsworth say that a good critic or a competent critic would be one who would remain in touch with poetry, who would keep on reading poetry regardless of his years. He would keep on analyzing poetry throughout his life. It would not be something that he has done for the first time, that once in a blue moon he decided that he wants to be a critic, he opens a book and he starts writing his appreciation of that book. So it has to be someone who has been attached to poetry throughout his life, who has been analyzing this piece of art for a longer period of time, considerable period of time. He has to be a person who knows the difference between higher poetry and the poetry which has been done for the sake of diction. So something that is grand and something that is simple has to be differentiated by the critic. He has to realize the difference between the simplicity and grandeur and something that is artificial entirely. He's also focusing, Wordsworth is also focusing on his subject matter here. He says why he has chosen what he has chosen. और उसका subject matter क्या था? He believes that anyone who has not chosen man as a subject matter does not have the right to call himself a poet. His considerable work should be based on man. According to him, man is the most important subject matter to be considered. उसने अपनी जितनी surroundings, जितने subject है ना, उसको nature के करीब रखा है, because he believes nature is something that gives a man a lot to think about. Nature is something that is going to make you happier. That nature is something that makes man closer to God. ठीक है? He believes that nature is a part of man and man is a part of nature, and both man and nature, they're part and parcel of God. So for him, these things were very important. For him, it was important to understand the different instincts, the different passions, the different shades of a man's personality. Because when you understand all these aspects of a man's personality, only then and then you'll be able to give the pleasure which is required, which is the end of the poetry, which is the end purpose of the poetry, which is why you do poetry. अच्छा, Wordsworth के साथ ही whenever you study romantic poetry, you always talk of Coleridge. Coleridge is one of the people who was, a closest friend. They are known as the Lake Friends, ठीक है? Because ये Lake District में इकट्ठे रहे थे cottage में, and Dorothy Wordsworth, जो इसकी बहन थी Wordsworth की, she was a close friend to Coleridge as well. So ये group सा था poets का, writers का, जो कि romantic movement को जो आगे लेके चले थे. तो नेक्स्ट चीज जो हमने पढ़नी है अब वो है बायोग्राफिया लिटरेरिया. Coleridge was not a critic exactly, but he's quite famous as a critic because he has done such discourse on Wordsworth as well, and he's done this criticism on Shakespeare as well. जो इसके essays हैं इन दोनों के बारे में, जो इसने बायोग्राफिया लिटरेरिया के शुरू में लिखा है, that is considered to be the greatest piece of English criticism. इसका थोड़ा सा इशू ये था कि he was personality wise he was a little weak. And he was suffering physically as well. So these two aspects of his personality, of his being, they led him not to be that famous or that great as he would have been otherwise. So let us study Biographia Literaria and see what Coleridge has to say about English poetry and how he assesses it. Coleridge's lives and works. Achha, Coleridge's popularity is known as the great poet of supernaturalism. He was also a great critic. Achha, he was famous for supernatural element. I hope you understand the supernatural element. Supernatural element does not necessarily mean that it was something to deal with, a jinn or a churail or a bhoot. It's something that is not seen every day. That it's not a bird, it's not a an ant or a man or a woman. It's something that you do not see. That's above nature. It can be an angel. It can be, any mythical creature, anything of the sort. तो उसकी poems में ये supernatural element बहुत ज़्यादा आता है. इसकी बहुत बड़ी reason जो explain इसको जो किया जाता है when you explain away why he has used this supernatural element. So it's said that he had this disease and he had a lot of pain. So in order to numb the pain, he used to take opium. ठीक है, और opium जिसे अफीम कहते हैं, ठीक है, because in old days there was no painkillers and there was no antibiotic for that matter. तो infections जब हो जाती थी या इस तरह की कोई disease होती थी, तो it continued and it continued to get worse. तो ओपियम खा खा के उसकी ओपियम की इनटेक भी ज़्यादा होना शुरू हो गई थी. पहले अगर उसको एक चुटकी से फ़र्क पड़ता था, then he had to take 2 of them, then he had to take a lot of amount of it. तो उस ओपियम की जब उसकी पेन डल होती थी और वो हेलुसिनेशंस करने लग जाता था, एक स्टेट ऑफ डिलेरियम में चला जाता था और वहाँ पे उसको हेलुसिनेशंस होती थी. हेलुसिनेशंस में वो जनरली उसने अपनी पोइट्री लिखी है. तो जो भी कुबला खान है या ज़नाडू है या एंशिएंट मैरिनर है या और इसकी पोइम्स थी, आई फॉरगॉट द नेम, लेकिन इस तरह की 3-4 पोइम्स हैं जिसमें सुपरनैचुरल एलिमेंट बहुत ज़्यादा, और ये वो पोइम्स हैं जो इसने इस स्टेट में लिखी हैं व्हेन ही वाज बीइंग एडिक्टेड बाय ओपियम एंड ही वाज इन द स्टेट ऑफ डिलेरियम. ठीक है, उसमें वो हेलुसिनेट करता था. वो जो हेलुसिनेशन में इसको जगह नज़र आती थी, कैरेक्टर्स नज़र आते थे, ये जो उस पर सपोजिटली जिसको आप आमद कह सकते हैं होती थी, और तब वो पोइट्री लिखता था. सुपरनैचुरल एलिमेंट को लोग जनरली इस तरह एक्सप्लेन अवे करते हैं. After his father's death in 1781, he obtained a preferment of Christ Hospital. He started working there. Okay? It's a school for poor children in London. There, for some time, Coleridge shook his mental lethargy and became active and energetic. He had this this disposition, which is known as melancholic, that they are prone to depression. They're pensive people. They try to, they don't try to, but they're always unhappy somehow. They always, tend to go towards the depressed side. They always see the bleak picture. So Coleridge was that sort of a person. Maybe it was something that comes naturally or physically, or it was something that was because of his childhood. Because his father died young and he had to do so much to survive and all. So he was a melancholic person, and that, when he started working in that school, he tried to shake away his lethargy. He tried to get out of his shell, but it was not. He was not very successful in doing it. He tried to be active. He tried to be energetic, but it didn't work for long. So he was full of plans for his future life. Okay, he made a lot of plans. You'll see as we go through his life that he made so many plans. He planned to do this and that. He wanted to travel. He wanted to go abroad. He wanted to write a book. But because of his physical condition, because of his mental condition, because of his psychological state, somehow his plans, they never pan out. He was full of plans for his future life, ranging from the profession of a cobbler. On the second, he wanted to be a physician, and on the third, he was seen reciting Homer and Pindar. So he was a very mercurial person, of a very mercurial temperament. He kept on changing his ideas. At one point in his life, he wanted to be a cobbler, mochi. ठीक है, एकदम उसने डिसाइड किया कि उसने तो मोची बनना है अब, ठीक है. फिर उसने डिसाइड किया कि नहीं, अब मैं मोची नहीं बनूंगा, अब मैं फिजिशियन बनूंगा, इनके मैं डॉक्टर बनना चाहता हूँ. I want to be a journal physician. And then the very next day, maybe, or a few days later, and a few months later, he decided, no, I want to get into literature. I'm going to recite Homer and Pindar. Pindar is another Roman writer. See. तो उसने होमर को रिसाइट करना, जैसे होते हैं ना आजकल भी जो शेक्सपियर, जैसे कायद आज़म के बारे में भी कहते हैं कि जब वो इंग्लैंड में थे तो उन्होंने शेक्सपियर की थिएटर कंपनी में काम किया था, जहाँ पे वो हैमलेट का कैरेक्टर भी उन्होंने प्ले किया था. यूज्ड टू रिसाइट दैट. तो ये कंसिडर किया जाता है बहुत इंटेलेक्चुअल एक्टिविटी, दैट यू गो देयर एंड यू रिसाइट समथिंग लाइक दैट. तो वो इस तरह की एक्टिविटीज़ में इन्वॉल्व हो गया. सो इन 1874 कॉलेज वेंट टू कैम्ब्रिज, वेयर ही रिमेन्ड टिल 1794. He became a leader of young enthusiasts who were devoted more to wine than to the pursuit of knowledge. वो जाके यूनिवर्सिटी में खराब हो गया basically. He got a group together, and the people in his group, the students or his friends, they were, you know, the happy-go-lucky type of people. They were more interested in playing the hooky, and they were more interested in, you know, drinking and making merry and all that sort of thing. So जो उसके इतने बड़े-बड़े plans थे to become a physician or to recite Homer and Pindar and to become a cobbler, they were all down the drain. He was involved in a different kind of company by that time. He ran from Cambridge to join the army, but soon realized his mistake and returned to Human and gave it this high-sounding name of Pentisocracy. So he did something else. He came back and he did something else as well. His idea was to settle with such friends as approved of his scheme. In the backwoods of America, Sadi enthusiastically participated in the scheme, but this scheme could not materialize owing to the practical difficulties that Coleridge had not foreseen. So he was not a very practical man. He once decided that he wanted to do something else, so he went out and planned that he's going to go to America. So he gathered a number of friends with him, and he said that we're going to make plans, and we're going to get a land in America, and we're going to cultivate that and live our lives there. But it was not very well planned, and when the plans are not that well planned, they don't they tend to carry out. So it didn't carry out, and his plan was let go at that time. So in 1797, Coleridge met Wordsworth. At this point, where there was this turning point in his life, and that was the beginning of their lifelong friendship. The influence of Wordsworth helped to mature his poetry in genius. Equally happy was the influence of his sister, Wordsworth's sister, Dorothy, on his poetic imagination. She was greatly struck by his genius and his attractive personality. Okay? तो वर्ड्सवर्थ और उसकी बहन जो थी डॉर्थी, उनका बहुत ज़्यादा अच्छा इन्फ्लुएंस रहा वर्ड्सवर्थ के इस पे कॉलरिज के ऊपर. वर्ड्सवर्थ ने उसके पोइटिक जीनियस को इंस्पायर किया, उसके पोइटिक जीनियस को कल्टिवेट किया, जबकि डॉर्थी ने उसकी जो पोइटिक इमेजिनेशन थी, शी मस्ट हैव सीन सम सॉर्ट ऑफ स्पार्क इन हिम बिकॉज शी वाज अ पोएट्स हरसेल्फ एंड her brother was a poet, and they were always surrounded by these literary evenings, and they were always talking about these kind of things. So she saw this spark in him, and she cultivated it, and they both of them, brother and sister, Wordsworth and Dorothy, they pushed him to write poetry. So this was the starting of a stable period of his life. This was the starting of the genius poet that we see in S.T. Coleridge. So she was greatly struck by his genius and his attractive personality. He had an attractive personality in spite of what people might believe, because he was a very talkative person, and he was a great orator, and he knew how to philosophize, he knew how to attract crowds to him, he knew how to talk for that matter. तो जनरली होता था कि वो बैठ जाता था, लोग दूर दूर से उसके पास आके, उसके फ्रेंड्स जो थे उसके घर में गैदर हो जाते थे और उसकी बातें सुनते होते थे, उसके लेक्चर सुनते थे, उसे कहते थे अच्छा आज तुम इस टॉपिक पे बोलो, एंड ही यूज्ड टू टॉक इन दैट टॉपिक. तो जिस तरह का टॉकेटिव आदमी था, उसकी इमेजिनेशन भी उतनी ही ज़्यादा fertile थी, because in order to talk much you need to have a fertile imagination, you need to have a rich imagination, your imagination need to multiply and explode. तो Wordsworth की जो बहन थी Dorothy, she realized that in him and she was struck by his personality as well as his genius. So in 1795 Coleridge married Sarah Fricker. So generally, as is the case, कि शादी जो है वो उसकी उसका बेड़ा गर्क करेगी. But his marriage did not prove to be a happy one, for he and his wife were temperamentally unsuited to each other. It's most probably the case in most of the marriages where the woman is expected her husband to be, you know, the stable bread earner, the breadwinner of the family, whereas Coleridge was not panned out to do that. He was not cut out to be the typical husband. So they had the differences, and there was temperamental difference as well. And of course the physical element was there because he was sick throughout his married life. About the time Coleridge entered Unitarian ministry, those who heard him preach were charmed by his eloquence and exposition. ठीक है, उसने church join कर लिया था, Unitarian church, ठीक है, and he became a minister, he became a preacher, and when he became a preacher, he was good. I told you that he was good, eloquent, and he was a good orator. He was eloquent, he was a good orator, so people who used, and he had stuff to say. क्योंकि वो जो काम कर रहा था ना, he used to believe in that. Convince होता था तो वो काम करना शुरू करता था. तो he believed in it and he turned to be a preacher. So people who came to his masses on Sunday, they enjoyed listening to him. They were charmed by his eloquence and exposition, how exposed he was, how much did he know, how much knowledge did he have, and he had the knack to present it, to communicate it to other people as well. The subtlety of his mind, the force of his arguments. He was very subtle at the same time. It was not, usually what happens is that religious people, they tend to be very forceful, they tend to push you, they tend to, you know, pull you in their direction. और वो थोड़े फंडी हो जाते हैं ना, लेकिन he was very subtle and his mind was very subtle as well. Subtle it means कि उसको intricacies का पता था. He knew how to handle things. वो जो होते हैं ना ज़बान बयान की नाजुकी, he had that. He had that on logic as well, and he had this force of argument. His argument was very forceful, was very well thought of, was very well documented, was very well supported by evidence from whatever he was preaching about. So Coleridge's religious opinion underwent a change, and in 1807 he declared that he had become a Trinitarian. तो उसने अपना church फिर change कर लिया. So he was a very temperamental person. So I don't blame his wife for that, because he was a temperamental person, a person who's changing his religion, not religion exactly, but अपना sect constantly change कर रहा है. So he is that kind of a person, but maybe he gets convinced because he's the person who reads a lot. He's the person who's exposed to knowledge and is exposed to good company and learned people. So he gets a new angle towards of things. He understands something new. तो वो चाहता है कि अब वो उसको try कर ले, वो उसको adopt कर ले. जब उसको पहले से बेहतर चीज़ मिलती थी, तो वो उसको adopt कर लेता था. Perhaps the change in his religious opinion was brought about by his study of the German philosophy. If we examine the development of his thought, we find in it a gradual change from revolutionary zeal to conservation. The German philosophers, they were very conservative philosophers, ठीक है? जैसे Nietzsche हो गया, Sartre हो गया, ये सब जो थे, there was this other one, they were very conservative and they believed, they were leaning towards religion a lot. So जब इसकी ये चेंज आती तो पहले रेवोल्यूशनरी सी ज़ील थी उसके अंदर, रेवोल्यूशनरी जज्बा था, रेवोल्यूशनरी स्पिरिट था, एंड इट चेंज्ड टुवर्ड्स conservation. He became conservative. In 1798, the first edition of Lyrical Ballads was published. It brought fame to both friends, but early in the next century, Coleridge fell ill and suffered from severe physical pain, to alleviate which he began to take opium. ठीक है? कोलेरिज इसका फ्रेंड था वर्ड्सवर्थ का. तो जब लिरिकल बैलेड जो कि वर्ड्सवर्थ ने लिखे थे और जो हमने पढ़ा भी है जिसका प्रीफेस, जब वो छपे तो बोथ फ्रेंड्स दे बिकम वेरी फेमस. सो दे बिकेम फेमस एंड in the next century it looked like as if times have changed and good times were to come, but maybe it was not so for Coleridge. What happened was that he became sick, and he became so violently sick, and his illness was so painful that he had to take opium. Opium ने उसकी senses को dull किया, उसकी imagination को dull किया, लेकिन at the same time it added the element of supernatural to it. वो basically उसकी hallucinations की वजह से. So continuous use of opium caused melancholy and depression. He was always prone to melancholy. He was always prone to depression. He had this bleak personality. तो जब उससे ज़्यादा ओपियम लेना शुरू कर दी तो उसकी जो पूरी पर्सनैलिटी थी वो ऑल्टर हो गई। पहले भी था सारा कुछ, ये सारे एलिमेंट्स प्रेजेंट हैं, लेकिन इसकी वजह से ओपियम के ज़्यादा इंटेक की वजह से ही हैड टू he became very reclusive and very depressed. So when his fit of depressions were over, his intellectual and imaginative powers became once again active for some time. But he could not apply himself steadily because his mind was harmed for good because of all the opium and all the fits that he used to have. और उसकी वजह से he tried to regain all his genius back, he tried to regain all his skill back, but it was not possible anymore. So what happened was that he tried to continue to work, he tried to write, but it was not as brilliant as it was before. But he could not apply himself steadily to any work. His friends persuaded him to start a course of lectures in London, which in spite of his bad health proved to be a tremendous success. और ये जो इसका वर्ड्सवर्थ पे क्रिटिसिज्म है, जो इसका शेक्सपियर पे क्रिटिसिज्म है, ये बेसिकली इन्हीं लेक्चर्स से इंस्पायर्ड है, इन्हीं लेक्चर्स का पार्ट है. तो इसके फ्रेंड्स ने इसके लिए ये एक इसको क्या कहते हैं, एक एक्टिविटी ढूंढी कि इफ़ ही कांट राइट दैट वेल एज ही यूज्ड टू, सो दिस कैन बी डन. ही कैन बी आस्क्ड टू कम टू लंदन टू डिलीवर लेक्चर्स, अ सीरीज ऑफ लेक्चर्स, जिसमें वो अपने डिफरेंट पोइट्स के बारे में, डिफरेंट राइटर्स के बारे में, डिफरेंट फिलोसफीज के बारे में लेक्चर्स डिलीवर करेगा. Coleridge's failing health created for him financial difficulties, which grew from bad to worse. He started taking opium in large quantities. वो होता क्या है कि जब एडिक्शन स्टार्ट हुई तो it continued, he couldn't control it. So जब ज़्यादा troubles आई, जब financial troubles भी physical बीमारियों में add हुई, तो he tried to take an escape route. और वो escape route उसका क्या था? opium था. तो उसकी addiction बजाय इसके कि opium उसकी help करती या उसकी बीमारी को control करने में help करती, it turned into an addiction. His days of literary activities were over, and during the last 10 years of his life, they were known only for his brilliant talk. His friends gathered around to hear his original and marvelously brilliant ideas on every conceivable topic on earth. Some of the great celebrities like Emerson and Carlyle, they visited him. So this was the end of this great poet who had such great imagination, who had such great poetic genius in him. And because of this addiction, he was completely wasted. And all that he could do by the time he died was that he could talk to his friends. And he was a brilliant talker. He was a good person. And he had a lot to say. So people used to come to him to visit him and talk to him. And he would discourse with them on a lot of topics. And they have mentioned a few names, few great names like Emerson, W. Emerson and Carlyle. They were good people, they were famous people, they were good philosophers, prose writers, and they visited Coleridge and talked to him about different things. They could be anything. So in the summer of 1834, Coleridge felt that he was dying. He had this premonition, and when he felt that he was going to die, he called his friend. On the evening before his death, he began to dictate his religious view to a friend. Suddenly his voice became inaudible and he fell into a state of unconsciousness, and few hours later he passed away. So this was the end of this great poet. He knew a few days before that he was going to die. He realized, his sixth sense told him so, and he decided that before he died he wanted to record his religious beliefs, whatever he wants to be. उसने अपनी religious philosophy पे एक sort of essay लिखना चाहा, and he used to dictate it to one of his friends. And he was dictating it the day he died, and suddenly his voice became inaudible, he became unconscious, and after a few hours he just passed away in silence. The earlier poems of Coleridge are Songs of the Pixies, which was written in 1793. The second one is The Line of an Autumnal Evening, 1794. Leoty in 1794. Religious Musings, 1794 to 1796. In these poems, you find a spiritual interpretation of the universe coupled with a rich yet dedicated appreciation of the physical world. So, आपको Coleridge में दोनों elements मिलते हैं, especially जो उसके early poems हैं, उसमें he deals with the physical world, but at the same time he addresses the spiritual part of it as well. ये एलिमेंट आहिस्ता आहिस्ता फिजिकल एलिमेंट काफ़ी हद तक निकल जाता है और स्पिरिचुअल एलिमेंट या सुपर नेचुरल एलिमेंट या मेटाफिजिकल एलिमेंट इसकी पोइट्री में थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा हो जाता है. मेटाफिजिकल, व्हेन आई से मेटाफिजिकल, आई डू नॉट मीन द मेटाफिजिकल पोइट्स ऑफ द ईयर, आई मीन द मेटाफिजिकल दैट इज बियॉन्ड द कॉमन कॉम्प्रिहेंशन. The second and maturer period of his poetic career began with his intimacy with Wordsworth and his sister Dorothy. The fruits of intimacy are Ode to the Departing Air. ये उसका फेमस पीरियड है, ठीक है. इसमें ज़रा मच्योर पोइट्री उसने लिखी है, इसमें वो पोइट्री लिखी है बेसिकली उसने जिसके लिए वो ज़्यादातर फेमस है. जो इसके बाद की पोइट्री है वो तो फैंसी और इमेजिनेशन पे बेस्ड है. ये थोड़ी सी लाइफ लाइक है. ये वो बेसिकली जो वर्ड्सवर्थ की थ्योरी ऑफ पोइट्री है ना, ये जो पोइम्स अभी हम जिनकी बात करेंगे ये वो पोइम्स हैं जो उस वक्त लिखी गई व्हेन ही वाज बिलीविंग इन व्हाट वर्ड्सवर्थ हैड टू से. ही हैड हिज ओन ओपिनियंस बट जनरली रोमांटिक जो वेन है उसमें ये पोइट्रीज लिखी गई थी. One was Ode to the Departing Air, then there was Ode to France, 3 The Lime Tree Bower, Frost at Midnight, Fairs in Solitude, and the full flowering of his genius was in 1797-98 when he wrote The Ancient Mariner. That's one of the most famous ones. Christabel, then he wrote Kubla Khan. He also wrote Xanadu. After Christabel, there is a predictable decline in his poetic figure, but can be seen in one or two pieces like Ode to the Dejection or Love's First Hope. So this is almost the entire thing, but जो उसका third period हम जिसको consider करते हैं जिसमें उसने Ancient Mariner और Christabel और Kubla Khan लिखा है, उसके बाद जो period आता है उसमें generally उसका decline है because most probably he fell ill during that period and his literary activities they almost came to a halt. और ओपियम की वजह से उसकी जो sensibilities थी, poetic sensibilities थी, creative powers थी, वो काफ़ी हद तक डाल और नाम हो चुकी थी. ठीक है. Coleridge's prose work they consist mostly of fragments, but those fragments are enough to reveal his critical and argumentative power, which were of the highest order. He did valuable work in his literary criticism, maintaining that the true end of poetry was to give pleasure through the medium of beauty. ये चीज़ इसमें ऐड होती है, ठीक है. अब चूँकि बेसिकली तो वो पोएट था, लेकिन हम तो उसकी पोइट्री पे इतना फोकस नहीं कर रहे बिकॉज हमारा एम तो ये है कि जो उसने क्रिटिकल एसेस लिखे हैं हम उनको डिस्कस करेंगे. जो उसने क्रिटिकल एसे लिखा वर्ड्सवर्थ के बारे में, जो उसकी अपनी कंसेप्शन ऑफ पोइट्री थी कोलरिज की, या उसकी अपनी कंसेप्शन ऑफ ब्यूटी थी, उसकी अपनी कंसेप्शन ऑफ इमेजिनेशन थी, द काइंड ऑफ डिफरेंसेस दैट ही फाउंड बिटवीन इमेजिनेशन एंड फैंसी, द काइंड्स ऑफ इमेजिनेशन दैट ही डिस्कस्ड, व्हाटएवर ही हैड टू से अबाउट शेक्सपियर, all these things that Coleridge discussed, हमने तो उन पे फोकस करना है. लेकिन जो उसकी पोइट्री थी, उसकी प्रोज वर्क्स थी, हमारे पास जितनी भी है वो फ्रेगमेंट्स में है. उसकी पोइट्री थोड़ी ज़्यादा कलेक्टेड फॉर्म में है, जबकि उसकी प्रोज जो है वो फ्रेगमेंटेड है, डिसजॉइंटेड है. लेकिन जितनी भी है it's important enough and it's good enough as well at the same time. So he did valuable work in literary criticism, maintaining that the true end of poetry was to give pleasure and the pleasure is to be given through beauty. So Wordsworth की जो theory of poetry थी, या उसमें जो उसका end of poetry है, उसमें ये चीज़ कोलरिज ने ऐड की है. और वो चीज़ जो उसने ऐड की है वो ये है कि the purpose of poetry is to provide pleasure, but the pleasure has to come through beauty. So, Coleridge as a critic. Coleridge was a great critic of English literature, as his name is mentioned alongside with Aristotle and Longinus. Longinus was a Roman as well, and Aristotle को तो हम already पढ़ चुके हैं. Longinus हमने नहीं पढ़ा, लेकिन Longinus ने basically लिखा है sublimity पे. So his name is ranked with the great fathers of English criticism. So he's almost one of the giants. And how is he considered a giant? On the basis of Biographia Literaria. Biographia Literaria is the greatest book of criticism in English. Since then, in spite of the occasional demurrers, Coleridge's status, at least in the English-speaking world, has even grown greater. Typical है कि पहले शुरू में Coleridge was considered that great a critic, but slowly and gradually उसका status जो है English-speaking world, because he's dealing with basically English poetry है, पोइट्री से डील कर रहा है. अब it's wrong of me to say कि वो इंग्लिश पोइट्री से डील कर रहा है, लेकिन आहिस्ता आहिस्ता we see that he becomes of the highest stature in English criticism, English speaking world में, क्योंकि उसने इंग्लिश में लिखा है. जो लोग उसको पढ़ते हैं उनमें उसकी, except for a few people who have criticized Coleridge, most of the time Coleridge is considered as one of the greatest. So Coleridge, the founder of a voluntaristic form of idealistic philosophy, of which he remains to this day the most distinguished representative. ये philosophy जो है voluntaristic philosophy जो है, ये इसकी है, सिर्फ इसकी idealistic philosophy है, and he's one of the very few people who have talked about it, and he's one of the most distinguished representative of this philosophy. Critics have claimed that Coleridge stepped across the threshold of a general theoretical study of language of the same type as that which take Galileo into the modern world. He is discussing something that is far more than what has been discussed before. जैसे Galileo ने ये decide किया ना कि तो the earth is not the center of the universe, and he decided that the sun is the center of the solar system. Similarly, इसने भी एक बिल्कुल ही नया idea दिया. He gave something, he gave the idea which brought the literary criticism into a new era. Just like Galileo brought science, the space science, या जिसको जो भी आप इसको astronomy है, इसको नई मॉडर्न वर्ल्ड में लेके आया है, नए एरा में लेके आया है. इसी तरह कॉलेज का जो क्रिटिसिज्म की फिलोसफीज हैं, इट ब्रॉट लिटरेरी क्रिटिसिज्म इनटू द मॉडर्न वर्ल्ड. Coleridge is head and shoulder above every other English critic and is seen as an anticipating existentialism and Freud. It is something कि आप कह सकते हैं कि ये जो दो philosophies हैं, existentialism की, ये जो Freud की psychoanalysis की जो philosophy है, Coleridge was one who was anticipating it. He was the one who was who can be called कि ये basis थी Coleridge की जो philosophy थी, जो उसका criticism था, जो उसकी theories about life and poetry थी. They were the starting point of what existentialism is now and what Freud said later on. So most recent American literary critics endorse Coleridge's principle of the reconciliation of the opposites, his definition of the imagination, the idea of organic whole, and his distinction between symbol and allegory. American literary critics को हम इसलिए करते हैं क्योंकि basically तो ये British था, और American critics generally have different ideas than the British critics, and Americans are a little more modern. So ये भी, even the American critics, they endorse what Coleridge has to say, what he had to say about the principle of reconciliation of the opposite, how two opposite things can be combined in poetry, two opposite philosophies can be combined in poetry, what are the principles that govern it. His definition of imagination, what he thought imagination was, how important it was, how does it bring together two different things. The idea of organic whole, the entire universe is one organic whole, the entire world is one organic whole, all the ideas are one organic whole, the entire mankind is one organic whole. His distinction between symbol and allegory. So is there a difference between a symbol and an allegory? Isn't the symbol and allegory one and the same thing? So he defined all these things, and people generally agree with what his definitions were like. Coleridge's achievement as a critic is rightly held to be supreme among the English critics. Though the criticism he has given is full of diversity, yet his main objective throughout is not analysis, but a theoretical certainty to reduce criticism to a system by the deduction of causes from principles involved in our faculties. उसने basically उसको कहते तो ये हैं कि he is one of the greatest critics and he is head and shoulders above the rest of the critics. He is one of the supreme English critics. But criticism उसकी जो है, उसकी जो सबसे ज़्यादा diversity है, जो उसका main objective था, वो एक ऐसा system devise करना था जो कि आपको explain कर सके कि why do we have to analyze things in a certain way. It gave you better theoretical certainty to reduce criticism to a system. क्रिटिसिज्म को वो ना समझा जाए जो कि जिस तरह उसको डील किया जाता है, बट ही वांटेड टू रिड्यूस इट टू अ सिस्टम. And how to reduce it to a system? By the deduction of the causes from principles. What make use of these principles? What give rise to these principles? He wanted to cut the causes from the principles, and as a result of it, he wanted to give rise to a system which involved our faculties. क्रिटिसिज्म का जो सिस्टम बने जिसकी बेसिस पे क्रिटिकल एप्रिसिएशन हो, अकॉर्डिंग टू कॉलेज इट शुड बी समथिंग दैट इज बेस्ड ऑन आवर फैकल्टीज, इट शुड इन्वॉल्व ऑल आवर फैकल्टीज। उसमें फिर इमेजिनेशन और फैंसी का रोल आता है जब आप अपनी फैकल्टीज को इन्वॉल्व करते हैं, जब आप अपनी सेंसेस को इन्वॉल्व करते हैं, जब अपने इंटेलेक्ट को इन्वॉल्व करते हैं, अपने इमोशंस को इन्वॉल्व करते हैं। कॉलेज कहता है कि जो इससे पहले क्रिटिसिज्म हो रहा है इट इज बेस्ड ऑन रूल्स एंड प्रिंसिपल्स। ही सेज दैट ही वांट्स टू remove these causes of principles, he wants to remove these rules from the system of criticism. What he wants is a different system of criticism, and his system of criticism would involve the faculties, that is your senses, your intellect, your emotions, your thinking power, your logic, your reason. The purpose of criticism is to establish the principles of writing rather than to furnish rules as to how to pass judgment what has been written by others. He believes कि criticism का purpose ये नहीं होता कि वो आपको ये बताए कि बाकियों को कैसे जज करना है, कि जिसने कुछ लिख दिया है उसको जज कैसे किया जाए, how to analyze them. He believes कि criticism का purpose ये है कि आप पहले से ही रूल दे दें, जैसे कि एरिस्टोटल ने किया ना कि इंस्टेड ऑफ पासिंग जजमेंट, जैसे आपने देखा कि सैमुअल जॉनसन ने किया है कि उसने ये बताने के बजाय कि लिखना कैसे चाहिए, उसने क्या किया है कि उसने जो राइटर्स ने ऑलरेडी लिखा हुआ था उसने उनकी चीज़ों को एनालाइज किया है, उनका सॉर्ट ऑफ एक कथा, उनका क्या कहते हैं उसको डायसेक्शन किया है, बताया कि उसने ये, जैसे वो कहता है कि उसने कैमस में ये लिखा और उसने लाइसिडास को इस तरह ट्रीट किया, एंड ही मेड फन ऑफ मिल्टन समटाइम्स एज वेल. So instead of doing that, according to college, what you should do is to give a system of rules which would tell you how to write instead of judging people, or instead of judging or appreciating or criticizing or commenting on what they have already written. In actual practice, he analyzes not so much poem as they exist, but the creative act that makes them what they are. ठीक है, अब जैसे वर्ड्सवर्थ ने आपको पोइटिक प्रोसेस एक्सप्लेन किया ना, इस तरह कोलरिज ने क्या किया कि he didn't criticize poems that were already written. He criticized the poems, but he criticized the creative process that was behind the poems. बहुत सारी poems को criticize किया, लेकिन उसने poems को as such, as a piece of literature criticize नहीं किया, बल्कि उसने जो poetic process उसमें involved था, जो उसके पीछे poetic process था, जो creative process था, उसने उसको criticize किया कि इस जो एंड रिजल्ट थी, जो पोएम थी, इस तक पोएट या राइटर कैसे पहुंचा, जिस तरह भी पहुंचा, अकॉर्डिंग टू हिम इट वाज नॉट द राइट वे, और वेदर इट वाज द राइट वे, वेदर द प्रोसेस वाज accurate enough or not. For him, only a theory of purity creation matters. He does not believe in the end product. He believed in the process that was involved. क्योंकि he believed that if the right process is adopted, then the end result would be right eventually. Unlike Johnson, Samuel Johnson, Coleridge is essentially a critic who practices descriptive criticism only as an illustration. Samuel Johnson का criticism ही illustration पे based था, ठीक है, descriptive criticism करता था कि जो example दी जाती थी उसको criticize कर रहा था, उस text को criticize करता था, किसी की poem को criticize करता था, उसकी drama को criticize करता था, लेकिन कोलरिज ने भी डिस्क्रिप्टिव क्रिटिसिज्म किया है, उसने भी जाहिर है जब वर्ड्सवर्थ को डिस्कस किया है तो उसने डिस्क्रिप्टिव क्रिटिसिज्म ही किया है, लेकिन उसकी डिस्क्रिप्टिव क्रिटिसिज्म क्या है, एग्जाम्पल के लिए। इस तरह आप इसको समझें कि उसने जब किसी भी चीज़ को, किसी भी पॉइंट को समझाना था या उसने कोई भी चीज़ एक्सप्लेन करनी थी तो उसने एक फ़िलासफ़ी बताई आपको, ठीक है, उसने आपको एक चीज़ बताई कि लेट्स से कि पोइट्री में इमेजिनेशन का ये रूल है, ठीक है, ये रोल है, इस वजह से इमेजिनेशन इंपॉर्टेंट है। फिर उसने इस चीज़ को एक्सप्लेन करने के लिए वर्ड्सवर्थ की कोई पोइम इलस्ट्रेट कर दी, किसी पोइम की एग्जांपल दे दी, तो उसने भी वर्ड्सवर्थ की पोइम यूज़ की, उसको क्रिटिसाइज है, उसको डाइसेक्ट करेगा तो आपको समझाएगा कि उसने क्या वो बात कर रहा है। जो वो बात करेगा उसके लिए उसकी जो डाइसेक्शन होगी ना, वो इलस्ट्रेशन पर्पसेस के लिए होगी, एग्जाम्पल के पर्पसेस के लिए होगी, उसकी इलस्ट्रेशन उस पोएट को क्रिटिसाइज करने के लिए नहीं होगी, बल्कि वो पोएटिक प्रोसेस समझाने के लिए होगी जो वो आपको समझाना चाह रहे हैं। His analysis of Wordsworth and his lectures on Shakespeare and ulterior theoretical purpose. In this he differs mainly from Dryden and Johnson, who are descriptive critics, ठीक है, तो वो कोलरिज जो है उनसे इस तरह डिफर कर जाता है सैमुअल जॉनसन से और ड्राइडन से, because he does not believe in criticizing writers for the way they have written. for what they have written, but he criticizes them on the way, the process that they have undergone in order to write something. जबकि Samuel Johnson और Dryden जो थे, they were descriptive critics. Being a descriptive critic is far more easier than being otherwise, because you know, in descriptive criticism it is very easy. You have heard most probably that there was this painter and he painted something, a beautiful face, and he just went out और किसी भी चौक में अपनी तस्वीर लगा देता है, वो जो पेंट उसने की थी, और उसके नीचे उसने वो स्टिकर लगा दिया कि जी find faults with it. So by the time he got back to it in the evening, it was full of these red marks. People have found so many faults in it. He was very disheartened. But what he did was, the next day he painted another face, and he put that in the on this crossroads या किसी बाजार में, मार्केट में उसने जाके वो तस्वीर लगा दी, और उसके नीचे उसने फिर वो बोर्ड लगा दिया कि इसमें जहाँ आपको गलती नजर आए उसको दुरुस्त कर दें, ठीक है. तो जब तक वो शाम तक वापस आया तो तस्वीर वैसी की वैसी थी, उसमें एक भी निशान नहीं था. सो डिस्क्रिप्टिव क्रिटिक्स का काम क्या है? गलती निकालना. तो जो दूसरे क्रिटिक्स हैं, जैसे ये है कोलरिज है, दे डू नॉट पिन पॉइंट मिस्टेक्स, दे टेल यू व्हाट द मिस्टेक्स आर एंड करेक्ट देम. ठीक है, जो करेक्शन का पोर्शन है ना, वो इन क्रिटिक्स का है. तो जो डिस्क्रिप्टिव क्रिटिक्स है, उनका काम सिर्फ गलती निकालें, जो आसान तरीन काम है. गलतियां निकालने में हमारी पूरी कौम माहिर है, हम सब माहिर हैं. इट्स वेरी इजी टू क्रिटिसाइज पीपल. So from Dryden to modern time, descriptive criticism has been in vogue in England. Coleridge, who is primarily a theoretical critic, represents a regression in the history of descriptive criticism in English. It was rather an interruption in the otherwise regular course of descriptive critics and did not have any following. Okay? ये जो था ना, he was one of the few. Because Coleridge से पहले भी descriptive criticism था, और Coleridge के बाद भी descriptive criticism दोबारा से resume हो गया. Because you know, when you're being a theoretical critic, it means that you're giving out a theory, you're giving out a philosophy, you're telling people what to do instead of just telling them that they are not doing it right. It's very easy. आप किसी को कह दें कि तुम ये ना करो, लेकिन अगर वो आपसे पूछे ये ना करूं तो क्या करूं, तो फिर आपके पास जवाब नहीं होता, because it needs something original. You have to come up with a solution. ठीक है. तो इसी तरह कोलरिज जो था, वो वन ऑफ द फ्यू थियोरेटिकल क्रिटिक्स था. उससे पहले भी जो पूरी लाइन चली आ रही थी क्रिटिक्स की, वो भी डिस्क्रिप्टिव क्रिटिक्स की थी, और उसके बाद भी इट वाज जस्ट द वन इंटरप्शन दैट वाज देयर. इसके बाद भी जितने क्रिटिक्स आए, वो भी सब के सब जो थे, वो डिस्क्रिप्टिव क्रिटिक्स थे. सो देयर इज नो स्कूल ऑफ कोलरिज अमंग द इंग्लिश क्रिटिक्स. ठीक है, उस बेचारे का कोई, जिससे होता है ना, स्कूल ऑफ शेक्सपियर हो गया, या स्कूल ऑफ नीत्शे हो गया, या स्कूल ऑफ सार्त्रे हो गया, स्कूल ऑफ काफ्का हो गया, स्कूल ऑफ वर्जीनिया वुल्फ हो गया. फर्ज करें, पीपल फॉलो देम. ठीक है, देयर इज वन मेन राइटर हु हैज गिवन योर थ्योरी, और उसकी थ्योरी को सारे फॉलो करते हैं, तो लोग कहते हैं ही बिलोंग्स टू दिस स्कूल ऑफ थॉट. जैसे उर्दू लिटरेचर में है कि अहमद नदीम कासमी का स्कूल ऑफ थॉट अलग है, और बाकी समवन एल्स, दिस मुमताज मुफ्ती, पीपल दे डिफरेंट, और आर दे द सेम, आई डोंट नो, बट दे आर टू ग्रुप्स. ठीक है, तो उस स्कूल ऑफ थॉट से एक तरक्की पसंद अदीब हैं, और दूसरे जो हैं वो जिद्दत पसंद अदीब हैं, और कुछ जो हैं कंजर्वेटिव्स हैं. इस तरह के जो दो ग्रुप्स बन जाते हैं, लोग उनकी तरफ उस स्कूल ऑफ थॉट को ज्वाइन कर लेते हैं. तो बेचारे कोलरिज का कोई स्कूल ऑफ थॉट नहीं है, बिकॉज ही वॉज वन ऑफ द फ्यू हु डेयर ब्रेक द tedious stream of these descriptive critics. The critical theory of profounded was too generalized and too occult to help others to become great critics. अच्छा, अब इसमें जो इशू है लोगों को, जिसकी वजह से वो कोलरिज को फॉलो नहीं करते, वो ये है कि it was too profound, it was in too much detail, and it needs a lot of work to describe something for someone else, to prescribe something for someone else. And was too occult as well. उसका पूरा ग्रुप सा बन जाता था, worship sort of thing ही बन जाती थी, because he had this element of supernatural. You remember, उसकी जो थोड़ी सी था ना, क्या कहना चाहिए, unhinged था mentally. The Victorians could not understand him, and his appeal was confined to few. He was different. Victorians जो थे ना, बहुत ही prim and proper लोग थे. They used to follow certain rules. उनकी ज़िंदगी में हर चीज़ के rules थे. अगर आप विक्टोरियन एरा को पढ़ें, तो उनकी ज़िंदगी में खाने पीने, कपड़े पहनने, social etiquettes, how to wear a glove, what kind of glove to wear to what kind of occasion, बहुत ज़्यादा prescribed ज़िंदगी, बहुत ज़्यादा हर चीज़ के rules described हुए हुए थे. तो कोलरिज जैसे लोग उस एरा में सेटल नहीं हो सकते थे. It is in the 20th century that the influence of Coleridge has been felt to a great extent. जब modern times आए हैं, ये हमारी century जो पिछली century थी 1900 something जो होती है, इसमें जाके when people they started experimenting, जब ये realism और magical realism और stream of consciousness, ये modern novel start हुआ है, ये modern poetry start हुई है, जो without rhyme scheme होती है, ये जो इसमें experimentation start हुई है, तो तब जाके Coleridge का जो influence है वो नजर आना शुरू, people have started listening to him, reading him and following him. He is the whole movement of passionate curiosity to explore the depths of creative art, of which he is the first and the last representative. And now he is Naika movement, and he wants to discuss. It is like when you study Coleridge, you understand that he has this passion to discover. He has this passion to know things. He has this depth of creative art, and in which he is original, in which he is single, in which he stands out. There was no one before him who was so imaginative, who was so curious, and who was so deep. And after him also, there are very few people who can have this claim. So it is difficult to summarize in historical terms the achievement of critics. Those influences has been delayed and as dubious as that of Coleridge. आप नहीं कह सकते कि कोलरिज का क्या influence था, because he was his influence is still doubted and his theories are still doubted. He's not considered very influential as well, but he's successful to some extent that we are still studying Coleridge, so it means that he was not that big a failure as some people might have considered him. His overriding interest in the creative process was one which later critics of the 19th century did not share. Because I've already told you that Coleridge strongly believed in understanding the creative process that is involved behind the creation. And in order to understand that creative process, you had to work very hard. 19th century के जो लोग थे, जैसे 1800, when I say 19th century, they were not very much enthusiastic in getting involved in the creative process. They were more concerned with the end product. So Coleridge's system of aesthetic could not appeal to a generation of Victorians, to whom no system of aesthetic was of much interest. So Victorians, according to me and according to many other people, they were very boring people, very prim and proper. And for them, these things of beauty and things of joy and passion and curiosity, it was not something very important. They were not much interested in it. क्योंकि ये वो era था जिसमें इंसान जो था वो अपने आप को I dare not use the term, वो अपने आप को कुछ समझने लग गया था basically, because ये जो Victorian age थी ना, ये scientific expansion की age थी, बहुत ज़्यादा scientific discoveries हुई थी, इंसान ने बहुत सी चीज़ें नई यूज़ करना शुरू कर दी थी, electricity start हो गई थी, और स्टार्ट तो नहीं ऐसा सच हुई थी, घरों तक तो नहीं पहुंची थी, पर उन्होंने डिस्कवर कर लिया था कि ये भी कोई चीज़ है. इस तरह की बहुत सी चीज़ें थी जिसकी वजह से इंसान का दिमाग काफ़ी हद तक ख़राब हो गया था. और तो पोइट्री और लिटरेचर, क्रिटिसिज्म एंड द इंटरेस्ट इन द प्रोसेस ऑफ क्रिएटिविटी एंड ब्यूटी एंड नेचर एंड ऑल दीज थिंग्स दे कंसिडर्ड इट a waste of time. Science was the ruling factor at that time. और फिर यहीं से फिर वो साइंस और रिलीजन और साइंस और लिटरेचर की जो वॉर है वो स्टार्ट होती है. So as a descriptive critic, his achievement is brilliant but sporadic and offers no single example worthy to be advanced as a model. तो बेचारे को कभी फॉलो नहीं किया गया, उसकी बात कभी सुनी नहीं गई as such, but we are reading it. We think that whatever Coleridge has to say was important enough. If his criticism survive as it vigorously does, it is not by virtue of what it demonstrates, but what it abundantly suggests, for no English critic has excelled at providing profitable points of departure for 20th century critics. अब जो literature लिखा जा रहा है, जो कि magical realism है, जो कि ऐसा समझ नहीं आता, जो कि इतना clear नहीं है, Coleridge जो है अब आके उन लोगों को जो अब उस literature को समझना चाह रहे हैं, उनके लिए वो starting point provide करता है. कैसे? क्योंकि Coleridge कहता है कि you have to focus on the creative process. जो writers थे 19th century के, they were focusing on the end product. ठीक है, जो चीज़ नज़र आ रही है उसको समझ आना चाहिए. अगर वो समझ आ रही है तो it's good enough. If the language is good, it's good enough. If the meter and rhyme it matters, good enough. लेकिन Coleridge कहता था कि जो चीज़ का process है इस चीज़ के पीछे वो important है. तो अब ये जो modern writers हैं 20th century के, ये Ezra Pound और T.S. Eliot और ये सब लोग जो हैं, इनके लिए Coleridge बड़ा important है, because he's focusing on the क्रिएटिव प्रोसेस, स्ट्रीम ऑफ कॉन्शियसनेस के जो नॉवलिस्ट हैं, ये सब लोगों को इसलिए कोलरिज, इनको जो असेस करते हैं लोग, वो इसलिए कोलरिज को अप्रिशिएट करते हैं बिकॉज वो फोकस ही क्रिएटिव प्रोसेस पे कर रहा होता है. Perhaps there's something about a professional pundit who had so little to say that was comprehensible to his own centuries, but 100 years later his manuscripts are seen among the richer of our capital assets. ठीक है? And this is the story of every genius most probably. There are some lucky who are understood by the people of their own age and own time period. Most of the time what happens is people are much misunderstood during their own time. So whatever Coleridge had to say was not understood by the people of his own century. But now, at present, it is considered to be one of the greatest critics of all times, and whatever he has to say is of quite importance. So they are the relics of mind, passionately in love with the free inquiry. Such a beautiful line. They are the relics of mind, the papers that he has written, the things that he has said, they're the relics. वो उसकी memory हैं, वो उसके mentors हैं, of a mind that was passionately in love with free inquiry. Free inquiry spirit थी उस age का. They wanted to question, they wanted to ask, they wanted to know, they were curious, passionately curious. So whatever he wrote was a memento to the mind, which was so curious, which wanted to know, concentrated and disciplined in its determination, very much concentrated, and it was disciplined as well. It was not something that was done haphazardly. He knew what he was doing. His research, his work, it made sense. It is disciplined in its determination to decipher the secrets of poetic discourse. He wanted to know, how does poetry come into being? What are its constituents? What is the process involved? ठीक है, वर्ड्सवर्थ ने भी आपको पोएटिक प्रोसेस बताया है, बट जो कोलरिज कहता है वो वर्ड्सवर्थ नहीं कहता. कोलरिज हैज मच मोर डेप्थ. वर्ड्सवर्थ इज नॉट दैट डीप. अच्छा, फिर हमने पढ़ना है जी कि बायोग्राफी लिटरेरिया में आखिर why is it so important? Why do we have to read it? What is the importance of it in English criticism? So it is the literary biography of a writer who was very talkative, discussing this and that all the time. ठीक है? He was this person, he was talkative, he wanted to talk, he has read a lot and he has seen much of life and he has experimented a lot with his life. जो बंदा सुबह से लेकर शाम तक 4 डिफरेंट मंसूबे बनाता है, उसका दिमाग कितना रिच होगा, उसका दिमाग कितनी जल्दी जल्दी फ्लक्चुएट करता होगा, जंप करता होगा, हॉप करता होगा एक पॉइंट से दूसरे पॉइंट पे. तो उस दिमाग का प्रोडक्ट पढ़ने में इट्स सो इंटरेस्टिंग. समटाइम्स वी हैव डिस्कशंस ऑफ फिलोसफी, एथिक्स, थियोलॉजी एंड साइकोलॉजी. हर सब्जेक्ट को वो टच कर रहा है इसमें. कभी वो थियोलॉजी की बात करे, रिलीजन की बात करता है, कभी वो साइकोलॉजी की बात करता है, कभी वो फिलोसफी की बात करता है, कभी वो लिटरेरी क्रिटिसिज्म की बात करेगा. After Aristotle Poetics, this is considered to be one of the most important works that has been written in English criticism, and it's one of the most provoking books because apne time mein it was misunderstood and now it is considered to be one of the touchstones. It cannot be denied that proved to be most influential but confusing as well. Its curious structure, largely critical in the second, may be accidental or may be the result of a hasty decision. दो parts में है, ठीक है, और जो सेकंड पार्ट है ना, इट्स कंसिडर्ड टू बी मेटाफिजिकल. और वो जो सेकंड पार्ट है उसके बारे में लोग कंफ्यूज्ड हैं कि वो पर्पसफुली उसने मेटाफिजिकल लिखा था कि उसको बस एक हैस्टी डिसीजन हो गया, उससे बस हो गया. It is the merit of balancing the two great interests of his careers, philosophy and poetry. He was much interested in philosophy and he was of course interested in poetry. So he wanted to bring these two together and he brought these two together in the form of Biographia Literaria. The structure of the book could not have been a great success if only the collection had been well and truly made between the two sections. So there is this connection, and the connection is lacking, and because of it, it's not that great a success. It's so discursive and sporadic in its argument as almost to merit its subtitle, Biographia Literaria, Biographical Sketches. It is surprising that the commentators, while they fail to agree on what Coleridge actually said, are really all agreed that it is of the first importance. ठीक है? Generally जो लोग Biographia Literaria पढ़ते हैं, उनको समझ नहीं आती कि वो कहना क्या चाह रहा है, लेकिन वो टाइटल के हिसाब से everyone is satisfied कि yes, this is the most appropriate title that you can give it. The reason is that it is not only a most revealing description of his relation with Wordsworth, it is also an extremely penetrating exposition of the romantic ideals of art and life. अगर आपने romantic movement को समझना है, if you want to understand how the romantics they thought about art and how they thought about life, what were their philosophies, this is the book to be read. The spiritual autobiography to be ranked among the world's greatest literature. This is what his soul went through. This is what his mind went through. This is not something that it's not the story of his life. No, it's the story of his soul. It's what he thought as a man, as a human being. That's the journey his soul took. So that's about all. Tomorrow we're going to start with Biographia Literaria and what Coleridge what different topics he discussed. Thank you.